Hello, everyone. Today is September 13th, 2021. This is a meeting of the SIG Network Policy API subgroup to SIG Network. This is a CNCF certified meeting, so please be kind, everyone, and let's all have a productive time today. So first things first, issue triage, nothing new. I think incoming issue count to SIG Network has been pretty low overall. So not much to talk about there. There is a issue, Abhishek, that one that was open against SIG Network Policy API to import some legacy documentation. I don't know who reported that. I poked again last night. I'll share. It was the issue you opened to do this, and Kudan did a first PR stab at it. Have you talked to him since, or is this kind of a stale PR?
No, I think I did provide some feedback,
right,
but haven't heard from him since then. Looks like he's also had a chance to look at it.
Yeah, I guess we'll give it another couple weeks and see if he gets back to us. If not, we can look at taking it over ourselves. The one glaring thing I saw was that the GIFs from the original repo weren't imported, and those are really helpful. So that's just a small thing that I wanted to talk about. Keep an eye on it. Cool. Okay. Let's save CMP, I think, for last, and jump straight over it for now to the network policy status kept. So Ricardo opened this back up for us, and he does not have the bandwidth to take it on. So I think we're going to need to kind of spread out and find someone to own this. I know
I can actually help. I just can't do everything by my own here, folks. I know that. So just to put some history about that, what happens is that we've got the endport feature going on, and on PEST we already got some other features that we wanted to implement, and the production and readiness reviewers, they have asked before graduating endport to GA to have a way to know how many people is actually using that feature, or I mean, if everything is going fine, and CNI providing some feedback, some metric feedbacks. And I have reached Tim about that because first of all, I think I understand their feeling, but it's not the same as adding like a metric from some internal component in Kubernetes, but it's something like I would have to go to each of the CNI implementations and say, hey, so now we have this status field, and you should probably add your feedback here for the users, and we would need to define a standard for that, and sometimes the standard for one doesn't feel right for the other one. And so what I asked Tim was something like, hey, okay, I understand that, but we should probably keep this simple, right? In a sense that CNIs can provide a feedback and a user can know if something was implemented or not. And Tim proposed that we did add some sort of a tuple, like was the CNI name, description, and message, and leave the CNIs to add any message that they want. So I know that, for example, Calico can process the rules and turn the rules into internal Calico structure and say, hey, I could do that or I couldn't do that. So adding something like, I have processed this and this is what I understood from this network policy, for example, right? I know that we could do something like that for Antria as well. What we shouldn't be doing, in my opinion, is something, and leaving that really clear, is something like, yeah, this network policy was implemented or not. this network policy is implemented in a node or not. This network policy, because it's gonna be turn stuff really hard. So I think that we should probably seek into something simple, like saying CNI could parse this or not using this specific API version or not, right? So we can even add that to status saying, hey, this CNI is using this Kubernetes this Kubernetes client version. Can be a JSON, can be anything. I don't know. So I was actually expecting also Tim Hocking to take a look into that and say what he thinks about that, but still, as I'm bringing this for discussion, I think that we should probably try to seek something simple. Otherwise, it's going to be another end port madness in our life, expecting all the CNIs to implement and everything and freezing the world, right?
Can we not start with a simple Boolean flag per policy saying this was completely processed or this was not, and that's it?
I think we can, but the problem is that let's make an exercise here. So imagine that you are a CNI that doesn't recognize, for example, the end port field, right? And someone puts the end port, but from your side, as you don't recognize that, you are going to simply to drop that field. So you still process that field, that rule, that policy, but you didn't process it the end port one. So your feedback is partially right because you could process, but you didn't say what you got from that, right? So
no. So in that case, the answer would be no. It did not fully process that policy. The only time the status would be green is if it was able to fully process every field. And if it was not, then it's either an orange or a red.
But how can the CNI know that it didn't process it correctly a rule if for that CNI, for example, end port field doesn't exist, right? So it's using an old Kubernetes library, and that old Kubernetes library doesn't have on the type spec the end port. So it got the rule and it processed the rule. So it don't know about the end port field, right? So this is the problem, in my opinion. Like it simply doesn't know that field exists. So for the CNI, the rule was processed correct. This I think it's the problem of saying true or false instead of what I did, right? But I see your point, Sandeep. So just thinking about if what happens in this case. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe we can take it offline, but it would, as a starting point, the fact that so if you're claiming to support a Kubernetes cluster which has network policy of V1, then you're supposed to support every field and subfield of V1 API. So it's really the network policy API version that you're claiming for. So let's say that the status is becomes a feature. I mean, it obviously will be beyond V1. So you have to support all the V1 objects. Otherwise, your status is orange or red, right? Really, it's a Boolean, red or green, or red, orange, or green.
But here is the problem. So here is the problem. Network policy was already on V1 when we added end port, and we didn't incremented network policy version, for example, from V1 to V1.1 or V1 or V2, right? So the object for that one is still V1. No conversion happens. You are not converting from V1 to V2 or from V2 to V1. You are specifically. I can make some tests later. But what happens is, imagine that you are using like a Kubernetes library version 119 and not 120 or 121 that already knows that field, right? So 119 still knows V1. It just doesn't know the the endport field inside V1. So in past, Dan wrote like a cap about microversioning. And I remember him presenting that on some SIG network meeting or something like that. But the discussion wasn't positive in a way of saying, yeah, we really want a microversion inside like a major version of.
So one quick question: is endport the only field that was new post V1 definition? Is endport the only change in the API since the V1?
I don't know. But another
IP block
example,
was
Yes, it
added.
is.
I thought IP block was added post, but pretty
SCTP
early on.
SCTP as a protocol, for
As a
example.
protocol was added, but I think IP blocks was as part of like the egress and IP block came together after V1 beta 1.
Okay,
I mean,
so it was
sorry,
still in
during the
before
V1
G-
beta time.
Yeah, it was before GA.
But for example, the SCTP protocol, right? So in the past we've
think
got
the sub-
TCP, UDP, but SCTP came after V1.
Yeah, but that I think is like a value that was added rather than introducing a new field to the V1 API. So I think the endport was kind of like the first one of its kind. I had like a, when Dan had originally introduced that versioning and status cap, what I was thinking how we could implement this was, and we can shoot this idea down is, we have like this in status, a lot of statuses for resources are implemented as conditions. So for example, you can look at deployment conditions, pod conditions, and all those kind of things. So I was thinking maybe we also do something similar where we have like network policy status, which is a list of conditions, network policy conditions, and then each of those conditions are actually very well defined. That is, there is a condition type, there is a reason, a message, and a condition value. So the condition type is, let's say, feature not supported, and then the value is always a Boolean, true or false. So for example, in the case of pod, it would be something like pod started, true or false. So something like that. So where here we have like a feature not supported. If the feature is not supported within the network policy, then you set the value to true. And within the reason or the message, you have the more verbose information that the CNI provides. For example, endport feature is not supported. The policy will be created with blah, 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 without the endport root. So this is how, and this is a list. This is a list of conditions. So that means that this is extensible. Tomorrow you could add a new condition to it. So for example, like, for whatever reason, you need like a separate condition apart from the feature not supported, network policy realized or unrealized, true, false, and then you can add new conditions without having to change the status API altogether. So that is how I thought we could have done that in the past, or at least in the KEP. And I think it's simple enough because there is a lot of precedence. Every resource in Kubernetes has conditions. There's a proper guideline on how to write status conditions. There's a page for that. So and then each of those fields are well defined. So we won't be the first ones to implement, but I can also forward the link to that conditions page on how to define those for statuses. But there's like one document within the Kubernetes GitHub repo.
That's
which
in SIG
explains how to do.
architecture.
Yeah, so fair enough, Abhishek. I think what you're saying makes sense, and that's even more granularity on the status. But if I understood Ricardo's question, and I still don't see the issue there. If the API server provides, let's say, an endport, and the CNI does not know that, does the CNI not even get that object in the JSON? Or the CNI will get that object in the JSON, it'll just ignore it because it did not know to look for the endport, right? So basically, if there's anything in the JSON that the CNI does not know, then it should be marked as not green. And you can have additional granularity of status, but I don't see the issue in having a very minimal status, which says, I recognized everything in the JSON and I processed everything in the JSON, hence my status is green, else it is not green. That's it. Isn't that a starting point enough? Either I recognized everything in the JSON and was able to process it, in which case my status is green, or there was something that either I did not recognize or could not process because of restrictions of my CNI, and since my status is not green. That's sort of the minimal starting point, perhaps. Ricardo, will that work?
I am not sure. I'm really not sure. I think so, but
I mean, you can always add
I
more fine-grained list of statuses, but I'm just looking for the minimal thing that gives the user the feedback that there's something wrong with this policy or there is nothing wrong with this policy.
yeah. I still have some concerns about how to deal with missing fields. We can say, okay, so we know that import is a field, a new field, and we are gonna use that one as the processing, like the extra processing effort, right? So saying we can process everything, and we can say if we could process or not just import as well. I think it's an approach. I'm
Yeah,
just worried about in a future how this scales. If I don't think we are gonna decide to add new fields to Network Policy V1, honestly, but this might be question.
Given that there are, you raise the point about import, right? So if all the CNI does is I recognize every field in the JSON for the network policy, and I was able to apply every field, then my status is green. If either I did not recognize something in the JSON, maybe because it was a new field that got added later, which I have not yet added supported for, or because my hardware doesn't support it, or whatever, my driver doesn't support it, then my status is not green. And that's sort of the minimal flag. And then beyond that, yeah, like Abhishek was saying, you can add various kinds of conditions beyond that for this particular feature, every sub feature. But it seems like it's valuable.
No, I'm not talking about like that granular. I'm talking about like a simple one condition, which
Fine.
is basically what you're saying, Boolean condition, but in a more standardized format, which is
Sure. So I'm still trying to understand the issue that Ricardo is saying, like for new fields that are added, like import or whatever, right?
So the CNI might not even see it depending on version, right? That's kind
Yeah,
of what Ricardo was saying too. Like for Oven Kubernetes, for example, like I think we're still on, our client Go package could still be back on 1.18. It's not, but if it was, like we wouldn't even see that. But you're also you wouldn't see anything about endpoints, imports. You wouldn't see anything about statuses. So like you're gonna have that problem with the status field itself too, right?
That's true. Independent. That's a micro versioning problem independent of network policy. I mean,
Right.
that's true because your client Go policy, client Go version is missing some fields that got added later, even though the API version didn't change. It's
Right.
still V1. That's generic issue, not specific to network policy.
Yeah.
I think there is a slight misunderstanding. Even if you have an older client Go, as long as you're requesting a V1 resource, you will get the entire, you should get still import also. Unless there's a V2 resource and your older client is not yet able to retrieve the newer version, then there's a problem. So V1, you should still see the endpoint.
But client Go doesn't drop those no fields to the version.
If you're requesting an older version, let's say V1 beta 1, and it doesn't have an import, so then it will drop the newer ones. But if you're still requesting a V1, you should still get like the entire V1 object.
Yeah, that's what I would have expected. So that's why I was saying, you need to just scan all the fields, and if you will get all the fields.
It would depend on the Kubernetes version. Sorry.
Right. So the logic in the CNI should be, the CNI will always get all the fields. It should scan and see whether, it was able to process all the fields successfully, in which case the status is green, or if there were some new fields which it didn't recognize, like imports, or it recognized it but was not able to program it in the driver, then the status is not green. And I think that is a reasonable expectation from every CNI.
Yeah, I agree. So I think moving forward, we just need, some people to kind of pick up and help Ricardo on this. So yeah, I don't know if anyone here is interested in helping Ricardo out. I don't really have the bandwidth right now. Maybe in a month or so I would, but if anything changes, I will tell you, Ricardo.
No problem.
If-
Yeah, if go ahead.
And I was gonna say, if you want some help in terms of like because I've written some status conditions in the past, I can just help you with like how to, like what is the design of the status condition that I had in mind, and I can copy paste that information, and it should look similar to what Andrew was just showing on his screen. Yeah, but beyond that, maybe wait after CNP stuff is in.
Yeah, no,
I'll see if
I
anyone
mean,
on my team can help out.
I don't think there is a huge worry, but I will ping team again to see at least if we are moving in the right direction, right? Because I don't want to write the cap and then like near to cap freeze 124 cap freeze, someone says, hey, we don't want that, we can't do that, etc. So. But I don't want to send that on SIG network again and make that noise again, and a lot of people jumping in and saying, yeah, a lot of things, but the discussion never ends, right?
Yeah, Ricardo, that's what we're talking about.
Not that I think that the community should be aware of that. Just to not use the wrong words. I just don't want to be like babysitting every single comment there.
If the way you've isolated it though, by explicitly saying like, we are not trying to solve the problem of saying this network policy is implemented, I think that takes apart a lot of the arguments that were coming in about it. Cause that's where most people had problems. They were saying it's impossible to explicitly make the CNI say this policy is implemented. Like it's programmed, in the data plane, like, because they aren't going to be able to do that accurately all the time. So, isolating the constraints.
That is the precise value of this feature. If CNIs cannot do it, then the feature does not have value.
I mean, it's best effort. It's does the CNI understand the fields that were given in the network policy, and does the CNI think it's implemented? It can't be used, for instance, in CI. Like you could use it, but it might not necessarily work. You could block a test on network policy until the status is green, but at the end of the day, like there's still going to be race conditions in there. There's no way to absolutely say without testing, right, this policy is implemented in the data plane. I think that was a problem, like Dan Winship was saying.
So, okay, so there's two issues. One is this definition itself of the spec, which I think that's why, Ricardo, we're saying do the absolute minimum, right? The absolute minimum is literally a flag saying, I recognized all the fields and I processed all the fields. If so, my status is green, else my status is red. This is the minimum definition if you want to have status at all. And then, so there should really be no debate about that. Debate will be about more fancy things. But if CNI can't even tell you that it applied, that's the limitation of that CNI. Why are we even having this feature? The whole point of this feature was to know whether this policy was actually applied in the data plane or not.
No. From my, I actually say that on the beginning of the meeting. Andrew, your screen is leaking. I don't know if you want us to see your Slack.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. I always do that. I've said that on the beginning of the meeting. So my idea is that we restrict into if the control plane could understand what that policy means. But if that was implemented on the node sides or not, I don't think it's actually viable.
So what's
right?
the value? What's the value to the user?
It's knowing if the policy, for example, we can add some validations in the future, adding into the status saying, hey, you are trying to create a policy with an invalid CIDR, for example, right? So you add a policy saying
That's not status. That's just etcd validation checks. Status.
No. See this way, Sandeep. I mean, we can provide some feedback to the user to why because all the CNIs, they have that, at least the majority, they have that controller, right? That takes the network policy objects and turn that into something internal. So Calico does have, I know that Antria have as well, right? So what's the idea? Sometimes those things, they fail. And why they fail? Because of any reasons. So endport not being supported, or an invalid field that wasn't validated in API server, etc. Right? So for the sysadmin, it would be something like, I need to go to that controller logs and see what's going on. While we can say to the user, hey, your policy was processed or not, but not applied. So your policy was processed or not, and this was and was processed right or wrong with those fields, right? So it's not about saying if it was applied on all nodes, even because it's almost impossible for us to know which node that policy needs to be applied or not, right? So for the user, yeah, you create a policy saying I want to communicate with all of the pods selected by this label X. No. So would you have a status with like 10, 15 nodes saying that policy was applied or not? I don't think it's. I understand your view about that value. I do, as a user, I do. I think it would be like more information is always better. I just think that if we try to put that as a minimum viable product, we are never going to deliver this status as well, right? And I think we should probably try to improve at least like the feedback of it, if it was processed or not, but not if it was applied or not. I think right now it's not the way that we can do that. And even if CNIs, they want to do that, they can use probably the status field to do that later. I don't think any CNI does that. Even on the CRDs, does some CNI does in the CRDs that saying on the CRD, like, yeah, this policy was applied or not? I don't think so.
So I think the biggest value of this feature is knowing whether the policy is in effect or not, because then I know whether I'm dropping packets that's intentional or it's a bug, right? Or I have this policy, why am I not dropping this packet? But if it cannot tell you that, then I think the value is quite reduced. And we can always add more validation checks. So I would, if we want to have basically just say it was processed, but I don't know whether it was applied, we can check with SIG network whether, in my personal opinion, that's not sufficient value. The original value of this is to know whether the data plane is enforcing this policy or not.
Yeah, and I have a ton of, I agreed with you. I totally was in your mindset as well, Sanjeev. And then I had a conversation with Dan, and I'll go back and find it. He tried to do this and failed and basically chalked it up like, this is impossible. It's not going to work. And he has a list of arguments that I cannot rattle off on the top of my head. But let me find them and I'll put them in the agenda and I'll poke you when I do.
Just to be clear about that, that's not that I want to implement status. I was living fine enough with that. They asked us to implement that on the network policy as part of graduating to GA.
Friend part.
Yeah, exactly. And I wrote that on the PR on the CAP saying, hey, I don't think this is easy as we think it is. But anyway, the team's proposal was just a tuple of like the CNI, the description, and the message. So if team agrees that this is like an approach, I think that we may try at least to evolve that in at least as much as we can, but not sweating too much on that, like saying, hey, we are now going to implement the status for each node, because it's really, really, really hard. if Dan couldn't do that, I don't think I will. I will be able to. Sorry.
And I'll find that. There's a bunch of old conversation. But anyway, for now, if it's all right with y'all, I say we move on. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Ricardo, I'm going to reach out to some members of my team internally and see if anyone's interested. I think this would be a really great project for like a newcomer to hop into and help you out with. I already poked them once, but I'll do it again. And we'll see if we can get anyone else to join and kind of start helping out here, especially with like the documentation and stuff.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm going to try to find some of the prior art to this status cap, and I have it like back in this agenda somewhere, and coalesce it up near the top so we can all see it. Okie doke. Network policy V2 update. I'm not sure who threw this on here. Is there some things people want to talk about regarding V2? Pair is out. If you didn't know.
Yeah, I added this so that folks who are working on this can give us an update. But I don't know, Nadeem, are you also working on this or?
Yes, but yeah, I mean, after that last discussion we had, we didn't make any progress because we were waiting for the CNPs, because there was a big overlap. So I was waiting for that to close. But other than that, we didn't make much progress on that.
You have a Google Doc on this, right?
Yes.
Okay, I don't think I have looked at it completely. I will look at it this week.
I'll pull it back up to the top. Nadeem, I also spoke to Girish from NVIDIA, and he works in Oven Kubernetes, and he was really interested in this V2 working doc as well. I linked it to him, so you might see some comments from him as well in the upcoming weeks.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look for comment, and if and I'll try to respond to them on the doc itself.
Sounds good. Thanks. And hopefully, you know, in the next week or two, we'll have a clearer way forward with CMP. Our plan is for this Thursday to present to them, but then we should be able to move forward with V2.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And now I guess we will hop back up into CMP stuff. I really just would like to hear, I know Abhishek, you had a meeting with Tim last Friday, and I think it'd be good if you could just give us a brief summary of what y'all talked about there.
Yeah, sure. I think as part of that, just before that meeting, I added some diagrams because I remember last time he mentioned that he responds better to diagrams. So so basically I gave him an overview of the 3 proposals that we had and essentially how each of them works. And kind of like the TLDR of that meeting was that he is in favor of some form or fashion of like proposal B or C, which is this. I think A he feels is a bit harder to grasp. So between B and C, he feels like maybe some of that can go. And I think he was actually saying that he slightly leans towards C because he feels that it is okay for an administrator to be more complex than the Kubernetes developers. So he feels that C can work but that comes with additional attachment. That is that we need to ensure that there is proper tooling on top of this. If we have to go with proposal C, we need proper tooling on top of it, such that when you describe this policy, it describes those conflicts, it describes things. And if it's not C, if it's B, then we have some documentation that needs to be done, which needs to explain like what is this new proposal and how this works. But he also had some suggestions for us, which I have like incorporated as C prime. So if you look at proposal C prime, which is, and the main difference here between C and C prime was that if you look at C, sorry, I have to go back.
Oh.
If you look at C, our empower or the pass action here means that you will, like to completely pass all the cluster network policy rules and directly go to Kubernetes network policies. And what happens when there is no matching Kubernetes network policies? That's like the default rules that we were talking about, right? And as our proposal for C was that we use some sort of a priority 0 or some numeric priority which defines what should be the default rules for the cluster if none of the policies match. So his suggestion was that instead of using a new priority number, what we could do is like, the pass is more like a consult option, wherein you consult the Kubernetes network policies first. If there is a rule that matches it, then you implement or you enforce that. But if none of the rules match, then you move on from where you were. So if you look at the C prime proposal, you can see the difference there. There is no, is it just my screen or can you, oh wait, sorry, I think it's my screen. So if you look at the bottom of the diagram, there is no default rules block in there. If you look at the arrows which the pass action is defined with, once you match a pass action rule, it will go and consult the Kubernetes network policies. If something matches, you implement those. That will be the terminal action. But if it doesn't, then you move on to the next priority rule, which could be the deny rule, or in the left-hand side, it could be a P50 deny rule, or it could be like a P50 allow. Those are two separate policies, right? So in the second, the diagram on the right-hand side shows that you move on from where you were. You don't go all the way at the top. So for example, in the second figure, pass action is at P50 and you consult the Kubernetes network policy, nothing works out, then you go to P10. You don't go back to P100. So you basically, it's just like, you are looking into the Kubernetes network policy rules. If nothing matches, then you continue your journey downward. So that was his suggestion. And I just incorporated that as a C prime figure here.
So what happens if this pass yellow box is right above the Kubernetes network policy and there is no rule for it to revert back to?
No,
right.
So I think we don't add special rules. This is just the understanding of a pass action rule. So pass action basically means that you go look into the Kubernetes network policies and then continue your journey forward. In your case, if let's say there was no P10 block on the right-hand side figure, right? That's what you're trying to say, right? P50 and then Kubernetes network policy.
Yep.
So the effect would be that it matches the pass action rule. It will look into Kubernetes network policies, and then it doesn't find any matching rule. It goes back to the next priority, which in case there will be none. So it just falls through and it will be allowed as is the case with Kubernetes network policies defaults.
Okay.
So you don't need a special CRD. You don't need special keywords. You don't need a special delimiter or to solve the default use case.
So
You just add another rule. Yeah, I mean,
the rule is to go to. It's like a go-to action.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a little convoluted just to get around the default issue, because people could be adding and deleting net pols, and sometimes you're going down and checking there is something, and then you come back. Sometimes you don't come back. Later on, they add some network policy or remove it. Then you do come back, loop around. I think that the default should be, if we have a default at all, it should be a simple logic. So it's fair to have this as an option, but I would like to think about it as whether it's worth the complexity just for have a default policy in order to do this sort of look ahead and come back logic. But other than the default, so this is just to address default, but other than the default, did he express an opinion between B prime and C prime or B and C?
Yeah, so
If you set aside the default stuff.
Yeah, I think for him, he's mentioned that the B seems simpler, but the problem of not the B prime, the B proposal.
Yeah.
I think in proposal B, he feels like the problem of, the ability to add like an emergency deny rule is harder. Like, for example, here, if you want to add something like, deny this compromise pod, instead of writing a straightforward deny rule, you need to remove that from the allow rule and use the not in expression. That ability is he feels is very important, and CNP should easily address that. And with the proposal B, he feels that it's harder to achieve that use case, which he feels that is a very important use case.
So then is he saying C then? Because if he says
so that is the only reason why he would slightly favor C, because you have the ability to write this one highest priority rule, which can be used for that use case, and that is the only reason why he would favor C. But he does acknowledge the fact that B is, with B you don't need to do additional tooling. You don't need those extra UX. The user experience will be simpler with B.
okay.
So for that, I think the B prime is what I just thought about over the weekend, which is this what we are seeing, and that is that it's similar to B. It is again similar in terms of default actions where you don't necessarily need like a separate CRD or a separate Boolean flag. You take the next default disposition, just like what C prime is. In addition to that, there is this one single highest kind of block at the top called emergency deny, which is to be used only for that purpose, wherein there's no skipping those rules, there's no deny, there's no going around the emergency deny. Those are the topmost deny rules, wherein your only expectation is to use those in cases of emergencies, where you need like a malicious pod to be denied. And that's like a way around to do the emergency deny by keeping the proposal simple. And that's just just a separate proposal I just thought about the weekend, and maybe we can see if whether this is an improvement on B, and whether this is something that is better user friendly, more user friendly, and also is like somewhere midway between the priority based proposal and the 3-action proposal.
And did he have any feedback on bringing this to SIG network and getting input from others?
Oh yeah, I think the idea is that we are already on the agenda. This was just for him to.
So we are on the agenda for day after tomorrow.
I believe so, right? We've already put our names in there.
Okay. So I think
I can double check that too.
Good to have this feedback. We know where he stands, and there are some variations possible. I guess we should wait and see what the others also say.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna poke SIG network again to keep getting people to look at it. So. But yeah, that's really good feedback, Abhishek. I'm glad y'all looked at it together. I'm sorry I couldn't make it to that meeting.
No, it was pretty late on Friday for me. So I can imagine you guys. I believe Sanjeev was already on PTO.
Yeah, no worries. My first reaction to at least C prime is it's a little less intuitive and would just require more hand-holding on the tooling, right? The tooling would have to be a little smarter just to push the user towards this, which I don't think is a deal breaker at all. That's just my first thinking.
I think the tooling recommendation was for both C and C prime.
Yeah, but if we remove some sort of mechanism for default rules, and have more of a go-to solution, which I understand, I think your tooling would have to be pretty explicit, and say, if you pass here, it goes to X rule that's there, right? You would have to let your user know what's happening at the end of the day, based on the current state of the cluster, right? Always. So Anyway, super interesting.
For the implementation perspective, like if I think about it in terms of OVS, how we will implement this, the C prime becomes a bit harder to implement because now you need to, especially with different priorities, it's a bit more difficult because now you need to go to an OVS table. Or I mean, I'm talking here OVS, but every other implementation probably which has some sort of like table and rules within itself would have this issue wherein the go-to point is very dynamic because the priorities could be different. Like your pass action could be in the middle of like two deny actions, middle of two allow actions, and there could be multiple pass actions because and they can have different priorities.
Mhm.
So the go-to for each of those pass rules would be different, dynamic. You can't just go to like a OVS table directly. You need to find that particular priority row within it. So it's going to be a bit confusing to, or rather, I would say not so optimized way of doing it.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
if we do it with the B prime approach, which is in that case there are no priorities. You just have like same priorities for all actions. In that case, all of those you can still create a separate table for anything below your empower rules, and yes, Ricardo, anything
Yeah.
below your empower, and you can directly your go-to action is just going to be go to this particular rule in your table. That's it.
Yeah.
It won't be dynamic.
I think anything that results in looping back and all, I mean, that was part of the reason why I wasn't a fan of the approach A is well, right? It gets convoluted and it does depend on what you add and delete later on.
Right.
So I think what for Thursday, we should,
So
my
proposal
view is we
C,
should still focus on presenting ABC. Later on, we can say, okay, there are some variations. These were some based on some feedback from
Yeah.
Tim. But let's not get diverted into A, B, B prime, C prime. That's like 5 different proposals. So for Thursday, go with ABC. And then later on say, okay, there are some variations based on some feedback from Tim. But I think that especially C prime is pretty hacky in my view.
the C prime is where you have a lot of loops, but I think B prime is where you just have like a single loop because all the priorities are same.
Right. Okay. But yeah, I think I would still approach the Thursday with ABC and then say, okay.
Oh, no, I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree too.
These separate variations were just for our purpose to see whether do we have like improvements on our proposals.
But these are in the same doc, so people reading it before Thursday will see the B prime and the C prime as well.
We can push them to
You could put sort of a marker there saying
section.
Under investigation or something, whatever.
Yeah, you could put it down at the
You
bottom.
want the review to be on ABC, and then they might come up with some more deltas.
Yeah, we can add a separate subsection here.
Yeah,
and
or put it in an appendix.
those alternate.
Put it in an appendix called variations or something.
Yeah. Okay. And then so for Thursday, do we want to have a list of like key points we want to get through? I know like last meeting I kind of ran through the beginning of the PowerPoint, and the assumptions. Like, do we want to run through those again, or should it be more of like, we hope you've reviewed it, let's talk about it? How do we want Thursday to go forum wise while we're there?
I think a little bit of review would help because not everybody is the same. We can talk, maybe we can, some of us can chat offline as to how to do it.
Okay.
But then rest of it could be on the YAML, and also leave enough time for Tim to speak his mind as he's already conveyed his feedback, and then invite input from Casey and others.
Sounds good. Yeah, we can go over, I guess, some more detail on Thursday, what we want to get. Like.
Yeah, let's chat offline, Abhishek and you and I, or whoever else is interested, about how we want to go over on the Thursday call. But I would say a little bit of review, some on the YAML, and then open discussion.
Sounds good. Okay. Is there anything else for today people would like to talk about?
But also definitely ping people to review.
Yeah, I'm going to ping them again. I'll keep doing it. I'll probably do it at least one more time before Thursday.
Yeah, and tell them specifically look at ABC. I mean, Abhishek will also restructure it, but let them get the basic proposals in their mind.
Yep. Sounds good to me. Yeah, there's nothing on the agenda for this week's SIG network meeting. So I'm gonna go ahead and make it and put our names on there first.
Yeah, I think this was very good to have Tim kind of spend time on it, really thinking about it before the
Before.
call, so that at least one of the leads has really spent time on it.
I've talked to Dan. I think it's on his list. I'll keep poking him. So hopefully we get some feedback from him as well. I think if we can get
Is
Tim and
somebody
Dan,
going to ping Casey or Thomas Graf?
I would hope they would. I don't know them directly, so I don't feel comfortable like reaching out directly, but I would hope they would see the SIG network folks. If there's someone on the call who could reach out to them directly.
I can ping Casey and Thomas on Slack.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Just send me what do you want me to ping them, and I can ping them. I guess there is someone from Cerium on our signature policy API group on Slack, and Casey is there as well. So if you wanna also post there and ping Casey, and I guess that Andre is there, probably they're gonna answer. But anyway, you can also post whatever you want on signature policy API, and I can mark them.
Okay. That's awesome. Thank you, Ricardo. Great.
And by the way, I think when I was reviewing the document last week, that's when I noticed that we have introduced a new pass action to the priority base. I never actually saw that change.
Oh, really?
No, I don't think we ever spoke about it.
Yeah, no,
explicitly, at least.
that's something that Andrew added afterwards. So I also agreed to that because Calico has that. So Calico does priority with the pass. So we thought that would make it a little bit more complete. So we added it later. We didn't have it earlier.
I was
Yeah.
reading through, so I knew that the biggest qualm with priority was kind of the matching, not in complex match expression stuff. So I just looked at I just cheated and looked at what was already there and how people got around that. That's
I
just
think Calico's pass is slightly different than what we are.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
Calico's is more, but I mean, you're right. Calico's is actually to pass to those special profiles.
Yes.
But anyway, the point is to make some kind of delegation / exception.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
No,
Calico
I
has a little
think,
more abstraction built in. So
yeah. No, I think I like the introduction of this pass action in priority base because my biggest beef with that was, or the proposal C was that it's extremely hard to get those intra namespace policies to be delegated. And with the pass action introduced, I think that makes it much more easier to write those policies. You don't have to rely on so much of not-ins and all those complicated negative connotations to the rules. So the introduction of pass actually is a bit of good, it's a great improvement on the priority base.
cool.
Sounds good.
Okay. That's all I have for today. Abhishek, I still have on my list to get to updating those network policy API repo user stories for CMP. Just haven't gotten to it yet. So just wanted to let you know that.
Let me know if you want to help on.
Do you mind if I unassign myself, Abhishek? I've not been able to watch everything there, and I'm just receiving
Sure.
the
Yeah, sure.
okay the notifications. Thank you.
Great. Anything else? Going once, going twice.
Oh, that's fair. Okay. I saw a latest update. I'm in Frankfurt getting on plane.
Yeah. We'll leave it there. It's funny.
For a while, I thought per A. Who's this A? Now I remember a pair.
Here, we can do this. I love it. Yeah. There's the man. Awesome. Okay, well, thanks y'all for coming today. I think that was a really productive meeting. Take some of these action items and hopefully we have a good meeting on Thursday and we can move forward, start getting some of the fun stuff with CMP. So I appreciate your time and we'll talk to you next week or later.
See you,
this week.
folks.
See
Have a
ya.
nice week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.